welcome everyone that's online, and thank you very much for joining us for our second masterclass. The idea behind these is to share project management ideas and some expertise as well, and give hints and tips on how people can do things differently. We're joined today again by Jeremy and Nicola. For those of you who don't know Jeremy, he is a project, program and portfolio manager with over a decade of experience delivering complex technology and business transformation projects. He's worked across a range of industries, including aviation, and also for a number of law firms, and is also the author of The Everyday Project Manager, which is a fantastic book, great tool, aimed at helping non-project managers understand how projects can be managed better. We're going to be talking today around non-projects, which might sound a bit backwards, but from speaking to a lot of the clients and candidates that I work with as a recruiter, one of the biggest challenges is resources and project managers that aren't inspired and challenged by the roles that the projects that they're delivering. So we're going to talk around that and hopefully answer any questions that you guys may have. The chat is open, so anything that comes up throughout, please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll come to them as we go through, or anything that's outstanding we'll cover off at the end. So let's get going. Jeremy.
Good afternoon. Thank you as ever for that intro, Nicola. Good to be here again. I'm excited. It's fun. It's a great subject because, as you say, I think a lot of people will relate to this. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it today.
So we probably need to start off by talking about what is a project, which I appreciate lots of people will know. But if you could give us a sort of definition as to what you would consider to be a project.
Sure. So yeah, and you're right. Probably most of the people who have signed up to a webinar of this nature will have some understanding of what a project is. So without wishing to teach anyone to suck eggs, it is worth just defining, because it helps us define and understand what isn't a project. A project, put as simply as possible, is a piece of work with a defined end state, which is different from the start state. So it's how businesses, organizations, corporations effect change. So and change is a really key word in projects, obviously. So it's something where you're going from one state to another, and the project is the mechanism you use to effect that change. It is by nature temporary, therefore, so you set a project up in order to do the piece of work and then disband the project team. And it's unique. These tend to be one-off activities. Quite often they're larger pieces of work, and they will often be of a complex nature. So quite often they're multidisciplinary. So it's where you're trying to coordinate a disparate group of people to effect that change. Quite often having some sort of project structure around that is helpful. And if we one of the analogies I like to use to help sort of bring that to life a bit, and apologies to anyone who's heard me give this before, as I know I've done at least twice this week, I think. But as an example, anything that is an ongoing activity. As I say, projects are unique one-off activities. So anything ongoing isn't a project by definition. And there are things that can look an awful lot like projects, but aren't actually projects. So a non-project and a project can look very similar, which is why we get this issue in business quite a lot. So for example, gardening, keeping your garden in order and weeding the beds and that sort of thing, that's an ongoing process to stay on top of your garden. That's not a project. But landscaping, bringing wholesale change to the way your garden looks, that is a project. So they're obviously clearly related in some way, but one is a project and one isn't. And I find hopefully that's helpful to draw the distinction between the two.
Definitely. So going back to the non-project, it's interesting. A couple of people have been filling in our poll. So not everyone is sure what a non-project is. So maybe we should spend a bit of time talking about what a non-project might look like.
Yeah. Okay. So the non-project in the manner in which we discussed it, Nicola, and the thinking behind today's session is that obviously a lot of organizations, they have a portfolio of projects that they're trying to deliver. And quite often those portfolios get bloated with things that are projects in name only. They're called a project, but they're not actually projects, and they're these non-projects which sort of will sit on a project portfolio and may have a PM delivering them, but aren't really a project, and they could be, taking up people's time unnecessarily. So what's the nature of them? What do these things look like? They sort of share various characteristics. As I said, with the gardening example, anything that is maintenance or upkeep is by nature not a project. So typically businesses will do one of two things. They will do projects, or they will do processes, and they're both equally valid. To say something isn't a project doesn't mean it's not a worthy piece of work. It's in fact, projects are the stuff that changes stuff, but they're not the things necessarily that keep the lights on. You need that operational side of things, the actual what the business does for a living, the thing that generates income for an organization isn't usually its projects. It's the things it does every day to generate revenue. So those things are still really important. They're just not projects. So be wary of anything that smacks of the operational side of things. So if it's operational, if it's looking at how we might improve our operation, that tends to be process improvement. And process improvement and process management and project management are both necessary within organizations, but they're different things. And what the skill set that you might apply to process management and improvement is quite different from the skill set that project management brings to the table. So anything that's ongoing, continuous, if you hear these words in your project brief, they should be ringing alarm bells. Ongoing is a real watch out for that. Continuous improvement is one we touched on in a recent discussion, didn't we, Nick? That continuous improvement, you have lots of continuous improvement projects. You might have a project that establishes some new way of working. That's valid. That's making a change to the organization. But the project should then disband. It shouldn't continue on. Any project that says we're going to put this in place and then do this, that, and the other to monitor it or whatever, the project should end when the thing is in place. So maintenance, processes, anything ongoing or continuous. Then there's some other slightly sneaky things, which is large pieces of work.
Okay.
And as I said recently, all projects are large pieces of work, but not all large pieces of work are projects. Just because it's a large piece of work doesn't mean you necessarily need to put a project management wrapper around it. There are plenty of bits of work that companies and organizations do that are large and might be daunting and might need some sort of structured thinking around them, some sort of critical thinking and a bit of planning, but that doesn't of itself make them a project. To use the gardening example earlier, if I'd failed to keep my garden under control, as indeed is the case right now, and there's a lot of people, I think, probably with the rain we've been having and the inability to get out there, the garden's got really overgrown, and it's far more than just a quick mow of the lawn. So that's quite a large job now. But it's not a project in the same sense that landscaping example. I'm not effecting wholesale change to my garden, but it would benefit from some critical thinking, maybe a bit of planning. Maybe I'll take that hedge down first and then mow the lawn at the end or whatever. But it's not importantly a project. It's just a very large piece of work. Large pieces of work do benefit from some sort of project management thing, some structured planning perhaps, but they are not necessarily in and of themselves projects.
So how do they end up in the portfolio? How does that happen? In
my experience, quite often what will happen is people will have a large piece of work or something that they deem is a project, and they will approach the project management team and say, look, I have this project. And quite often that's taken on faith that it is a bit of a project. And as I say, these non-projects quite often wear the clothes of projects. They look like them. They if it quacks like a duck and all that, but they do appear to be projects at face value. So you take them on, you might assign a project manager to look at it. And at that point, sometimes it can be quite difficult even to unwind that decision, to go, hang on, we've had a look at this now, and you know what, it's not a project. This would be better served by someone in the operation just doing this piece of work as part of their day job because it totally fits within their remit. It doesn't need the project wrapper around it. So quite often it's, yes, people coming to the project management team and saying, I need a project manager, and that being taken at face value, or I have this large piece of work, can I get some input to that? And rather than going, yes, absolutely, we'll look at it, but then stepping away when and advising on a better course or a better way of resourcing it, we tend to pick it up and go, well, it looks enough like a project. We'll fit the tools of project management around it and we'll deliver it as a project. But where you end up then is you've got a load of projects on your portfolio with a finite team of project managers and people who can work on projects. And you end up with this slightly bloated portfolio of things that you're doing, which are all, it's all good stuff. It's not detrimental to the business, but on one level, but it is in the sense that you're using up people who could be better used, actually delivering what are projects and actually affecting business change.
So if we were to look at the downsides of having non-projects or pieces of work in a portfolio, what would you say the downsides to the business would be? Well,
there are several. I mean, on the one hand, as I say, there's no problem just applying a project management mindset to a piece of work. That's fine, and I'd encourage that all day long. But on the, as I say, one of the major downsides is that it takes up resource that might be better deployed elsewhere, and that works in two ways. One, you could be using project management resource to deliver a project that isn't really a project, and that's stopping those PMs being used on other projects that might be a better use of their time, a more profitable use of their time. But also, it's denying others in the business the opportunity to lead a piece of work that is just a piece of work rather than a project. So quite often these things are large pieces of work that are quite interesting and might actually serve someone really well to take ownership of. Perhaps a younger or less experienced person within the organization could take that on as a development piece.
Yeah.
So they're not getting that opportunity because it's been thrown over to the PM's team to go and do it. The other thing to bear in mind is that if you're running a team of project managers, PMs have gone away and qualified, and there's a market rate that you pay for a PM, and that market rate goes up the more experienced they are. So that's quite a costly resource to lead something that isn't a project, and you've got a PM with this whole broad range of skill sets, so stakeholder management, risk management, time, cost and quality balancing and all that sort of thing, that's not being made best use of, and it's a costly person to put on a thing that might be more effectively delivered by someone else who isn't perhaps quite such an expensive resource as a PM. So there's a cost benefit to an organization of making sure large pieces of work are resourced properly.
And I presume that cost also expands out into the business analysts and the PMO support and the project support that were working on that non-project.
Well, absolutely, because of course, as soon as you put that project wrapper around it, there will be an overhead associated with that. And particularly in larger organizations, there's going to be a PMO typically involved. So the project management office pulling together information about all the projects on the portfolio. There will be, as you say, business analysts. There'll be people from the operational team who are pulled in to do various things when actually they could just be running it within their own team as part of their day-to-day business. So there's all these other resources that might be pulled, even just to support the structure of a project, when actually that's not necessary. What you need is a project management mindset rather than a project. And I think that's a really important distinction. It's not to say don't treat it as a project. Just be aware that it's not a project. You can run it in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
But don't bring everything to bear on it that a project brings with it, because a project will cause an uplifting cost potentially.
And one of the biggest challenges that when I'm talking to heads of portfolio and head of projects and programs is the resources and the lack of them. And the market has changed. It's quite challenging to find good people. Perhaps that shift in mindset could free up some of those resources to really focus on those true projects.
Well, exactly so. I mean, it is, if you do have these if you've got a portfolio of 30 projects, and even, you know, a small percentage of them, say 3 or 4 of them are not projects, that's still 3 or 4 people, you know, probably 1 FTE who's working on that, on those projects, when they could be much better resourced and freed up to deliver effective training. So it's a really bad use of resource, but also reduces the capacity in the team and in the organization to make those changes. You know, the way organizations, you know, an organization is let's say profitable doing what it is doing, and if it keeps on doing that all the time, it will remain as profitable as that. Yeah. Projects are what you need to make things more profitable, to make things change, to be different, to be competitive. And if you're using up all your resources on stuff that is really keeping the lights on, or not as added value as some projects could be, that's going to be detrimental to the entire organization.
So we've got the poll's been running about non-projects and who's currently running them. 50% of people on the webinar or the masterclass today are currently running non-projects, which is really interesting. In terms of those people, that if anyone wants to comment, I'm quite interested to know the downside to project managers, because on one hand, if they're busy, that's good. But is there a downside to being a project manager running non-projects? If anyone has any comments, please do post. But what would your take on that be?
I'd say absolutely there is. You know, if you've decided on a career in project management, you want to run projects and you want to use that full range of the skill set, and that means running engaging, proper full-blown projects. So there is definitely a downside to individuals, but you know, and that plays out on both sides, because if you've got PMs doing bits of work that don't really make full use of their project management skill set, they're going to get very bored and perhaps disinterested in their role if they're continually taking on these sorts of jobs and not getting to do proper meaty projects. Then ultimately they're going to end up a bit dissatisfied in their role, and they will look to other organizations who can perhaps offer them those more meaty and interesting projects. But there's a thing on the flip side as well, which is, as I said earlier, by putting a PM on it, you're potentially denying someone else in another team the opportunity to do something. So I do think I'm a believer in the idea that, you know, project management is a skill set that most people should have. It's a life skill. You can apply it not just to work and you know, corporate life, but actually to your personal life. It teaches good skills in terms of planning, in terms of budgeting, cost management, all these things that we use in our everyday life. So actually upskilling others in the organization to do those things is beneficial to them. It gives them another aspect to their job. It's cheap development, you know, it's work you were going to do anyway. But if you can upskill them a bit to do that, and I'm not suggesting that people just get put on things and left to, you know, suffer, you know, they should be appropriately supported to do that. Yeah. And you can do that through training, which as the owner of a training company, I would absolutely advocate. But you know, also, you know, buddying and you know, I'm not saying that the project management team has to step away altogether from these things, but they can offer support. And I think that's an important aspect, which is sometimes overlooked. You can say that's not a project and still remain involved to support people who will deliver it using that project management mindset.
Interesting comment that's just come up from someone here is that they're busy on non-projects and the business bring in contractors to deliver the meaty, exciting projects within the team, which obviously is quite frustrating from that perspective. So if I was currently looking at the projects I'm working on and realise actually a couple of these are large pieces of work or non-projects, continuous improvement, maintenance, what should I do?
I think there's two aspects to this. There's the challenge piece and the education piece. So on the one hand, if you do have a piece of work, it's quite all right, and in fact, I would argue incumbent upon you to challenge that and say, look, for these reasons, I don't think this is. You don't even have to say I don't think it's a project, but you could argue as a PM that there's a better way of resourcing this project, that I'm not the best person to deliver this. This could be delivered within the BAU teams or the operational teams and would be better done there. Quite often I've sat there and costed out my involvement on a project. And as soon as they see that by putting a PM on there increases the capital cost or the internal resource cost by that amount, suddenly they could become very interested in other ways of resourcing it. So I think there's a very reasonable thing to challenge there and say, look, I don't think it's a project for these reasons, and I think it would be better resourced in this way. The other thing is to educate, and I really do believe one thing that's quite often overlooked is the PM's responsibility to act as an ambassador for project management in general, and to help explain to those around them what exactly the project management skill set is, why we do the things we do, why a project ought to have clearly defined benefits and objectives. That's another point, interestingly. These non-projects typically won't have very well defined outcomes because it looks a lot like what we do now, but those things are important. I think it's really important for PMs to point out how it could be done, offer support, but educate those around them on broader skill set and discipline of project management, and why it can be helpful to deliver this with a PM mindset, but it's not actually a project, And I think those are really reasonable and actually constructive and positive conversations to be having.
A really interesting comment on the chat come through. So in this firm, they have non-projects in the portfolio because they require capital spend, which isn't factored into their BAU budget, but they are often led by non-PMs, which is good. So they sit in the portfolio, but they're managed by non-PMs.
And that's really interesting. And I've worked for several organizations where that's absolutely the case, where people look at the project team and they create these projects because I had off the record conversations where, well, look, we had to call it a project because it was the only way to get this piece of work done. I'd never have got funding for it if I tried to get it in my own budget. And that's a much broader organizational issue, I would argue. It's not something we're going to fix with project management necessarily. But what's great on the one hand to hear is that they are resourcing it with non-project managers, giving people that opportunity, not tying up your sort of open quotes, qualified or accredited PMs doing that work. But I think the thing that sits behind that is making sure those people who have been asked to lead those projects or projects in inverted commas again have the skills. So making sure that you're helping them, giving them the boundaries, explaining to them a bit about project management, maybe giving them a bit of project management training. And again, there are courses out there on training for non-project managers.
I know a really good one.
Yeah, absolutely, and some of them are extraordinarily reasonable. But actually interesting that's again a really good point. You can train a team of people, a team of non-project managers enough that they can go away and they can do these things for the same price as it costs one person to put through APM or Prince 2. You can do 20 people on one of these courses. So it's really good value education, and you upskill a whole group of people who then don't just do that well, but go back to their jobs with a better sense of how to deliver a piece of work, how to approach a piece of work. So it's a win-win-win-win-win.
And going back to your analogy around gardening, so my overgrown garden that has a large piece of work to get it back to where it should be, but it isn't a project. Applying that project structure to that large piece of overgrown garden would presumably help deliver it in a much better way.
Well, absolutely, and I'll make the point again, Nicola. It's about applying the PM mindset rather than calling it a project and bringing all of project management to bear on it. Yeah. You don't need to do necessarily an extensive risk workshop on cutting the hedges back. You might do that though. There's no harm in doing those things, but some would say that's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, right? But actually being able to look at it and go, right, my objective is to do this. This is what I want the end state to look like. What's a sensible order in which to approach that? Is there anything I must do first before I can do something else? These are all sort of, project management tropes and themes and ideas that you can bring to bear. What's the cost of doing it? would it be more effectively resourced if someone else came in and did it instead of me? What's the value of my time to do this? So all those things that project managers might look at are definitely of value, but but to bring equally, you don't want to talk about are we going to manage the budget hour by hour? Are we going to look at a deadline and raise changes if we're not there on time? That's what project management does. It's about predictability of output, and it's really really important to understand that doing that is good, but not essential for all pieces of work. And particularly if there isn't a pressing deadline or budget, which is a real feature of projects, obviously, then that's another good signifier that perhaps this isn't one.
And that's quite a nice link onto what I was about to ask, actually. Is there a danger that if it's not classified as a project and sitting in a portfolio with project governance, that it simply won't get done or it won't be prioritised?
I think there is a danger of that. But I equally don't think that the solution to that is to dump all your pieces of work into the project management portfolio. There is an issue there if pieces of work aren't getting done because they don't sit on the project management portfolio. That's as I say, the solution is not to break the portfolio. The solution is to look at why those pieces of work aren't getting done when they sit out of it. And again, there's an argument there that says by upskilling people to run small projects themselves, those pieces of work might get done. By creating an organization that supports people to do large pieces of work and take them on within their day job, and carves out the time to allow them to do that. That's how you fix that problem. The solution is not to bloat the portfolio, and like I say, it's not just your project management resource; it's all the associated resources that go with it.
Yeah.
And you just slow the business down,
which is not a good thing.
Apparently not. No. That being the point. Yes, not a good thing. Yes.
We've been talking for about half an hour now about non-projects. Does anyone have any questions or any sort of examples of something that they're potentially working on and not sure whether that's its project or non-project? We've got a couple of comments around when they're budgeting projects, not all firms have internal resources accounted in that. I'm guessing that still doesn't mean you want to put things into the portfolio if they shouldn't be there.
Not everyone accounts for them. That's absolutely true. And it's, having been a contractor for years, I was constantly, there was a line for me in every budget plan, because I was an external cost. And yet there were people I was working alongside who were working on the same project, 9 to 5, same as me, whose costs weren't accounted for at all. And because they're not working for the project doesn't mean their time isn't being utilized, doesn't mean that they aren't costing the company money. Their salary is still being paid, their benefits are still going out each month, So I absolutely accept that a lot of companies do not factor in internal resource costs. And I've yet to see a wholly satisfactory way in which that's been done anywhere. But that doesn't take away from the fact that those resources are being used. And they are costing the company money, and they could be used more effectively. And actually, that's it's a really interesting point. And I think it's one thing that a lot of organisations and a lot of project organisations in particular would be well served by doing, is looking at what their internal, and not just worrying about does it hit the capital cost? Is it how do we account for this at the end of the tax year?
Okay. And in terms of, we've talked a lot about educating non-project stakeholders in the business and the people that are coming to the team with those pieces of work. Is there anything that a project manager could do to make an impact on that? I mean, they don't have hours to spare to run training courses, etc. But is there any sort of small pieces of nudging in the right direction that they can do to help that? I think
partly it's the ambassadorial role of the PM that I touched on earlier, but I think there's also, if you're a PM, you're typically reporting into a program or portfolio manager, and there is no harm in highlighting to those people where these pockets of non-projects exist. I also think it's incumbent on program and portfolio managers, and portfolio managers in particular, or global heads of projects, those people in that position, to regularly review the portfolio and look at whether they have, because they're not always obvious at the start. Sometimes you're working on something for 2 or 3 months before it becomes obvious that actually this isn't, you've done an exploratory phase, you might be getting it to a business case, or you might have done the business case, and in getting it to a PID, you realize that actually this isn't really something that's best delivered by this team. So those regular reviews are important, and challenging yourself, is everything on here best served by resourcing it in this way, by calling it a project, by bringing to bear the project organization to it. So that's important, but also guarding the gateways, those entries in, and when somebody says, I've got a project, challenge at that point. Is it though? Is it just a large piece of work that you want some support on? It's again to that earlier point around, things come into the project management team to get done. Sometimes that's from a cost perspective because it's the only way it gets budget, but sometimes it's because they see that as a way of resourcing it. I will stick a project manager on it. That happens. It shouldn't. And that's not just project management. I'm sure lots of teams, lots of people working in different teams will have experience of, well, that just comes to my team because I've got a reputation for people who get things done in my team. The busiest person is the one who always gets more work, right? But by guarding those gateways, by acting as a good guardian of your project team, but also of your own workload as a project manager. If you get something and you don't believe it is best served by the project management outfit and skill set, it's okay and right to say, I'm sorry, I don't think this is a project. That is, in fact, your responsibility as a project manager. And I obviously completely understand not all organizations are set up to be receptive to that message. But I think it's an important one still to make when the opportunity arises, and there are different ways of making it which might be more acceptable than others.
And presumably that's harder to do if you are sort of 2 months down the line before the realization comes in that it doesn't sit as a project.
It can be, yeah, absolutely. If people, there's the sunk time fallacy, isn't there? The sunk cost fallacy that we've already invested this much, therefore we must see it through. But importantly, it's the sunk cost fallacy. That is a fallacy, there's, it's not always a great message to be giving. It's not always going to be brilliantly received. But if you believe it's the right thing to stop that project because it's a poor use of resources, a poor use of time, or importantly, because it's going to be more costly to the business to run it in this way when it could just be run as part of BAU, then it's the right call to be making. You're adding value by making that call. There's obviously the more time you invest, yes, the more challenging that can be, but it's still the right call to be making. And as I say, that should be done in a constructive way, and not fully without support. The flip side of it is, just because it's a non-project, just because you identify it's a non-project, doesn't mean you couldn't run it as a project. There might be very good reasons to do that, creating relationships, by helping people to see the benefit of thinking of project management. There are sort of political reasons why you might choose to do it, but it's important that you do that with your eyes open, that everyone, or key stakeholders understand, yes, we'll run this as a project, but can we agree this is sitting outside how we would typically do this?
And potentially next time we won't be doing that.
We will push back, and exactly, we'll do it one time, one time as a favor. That's an important thing to make clear.
So in terms of the key takes from this, it's about identifying what is and isn't a project. But then what I've really taken from what you've said is the education piece around stakeholders in the business and the business itself, and how they can upskill their teams and give them more interesting pieces of work to deliver, rather than passing everything over to the project team.
That's right. And this isn't this isn't a project that's just going. This isn't a problem, sorry, that's just going to be solved within the project team. It's an organisational piece. But I think probably that messaging starts within the project team. It starts with having those conversations outwards with stakeholders, with the business as a whole, educating about not just, you know, why this isn't a project, but actually why project management is brilliant. And these are the excellent reasons why you would treat things in a project management way. Because it is so important. You know, it does create greater predictability. It enables you to do change in a way that is smoother for the business, is less disruptive. All these, you know, are potentially good things, but best served on the things that benefit most from that treatment. So yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, I'd be really interested to know if anyone could write into the chat if your organisation offers any sort of project guidance or coaching for those stakeholders for running non-projects or pieces of work. That would be really interesting to find out, actually. I'm not sure how many businesses
I'd be very interested if they don't, because I know a good company.
Shameless plug.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
Yeah, a couple do, but it doesn't seem to be very consistent across the board. I think it might be a bit more ad hoc if needed, rather than a general take on that. Okay, I think we've explored that quite a lot. Yeah, there's a couple of no's here as well. I'll put you in touch. But in terms of non-projects and someone who's also getting you in very soon, which is good to know.
Indeed, yeah.
Enjoy.
Excellent. Problem solved.
Has anyone got any other questions about non-projects and how to push back on those? I think we've covered off quite a few ones that come through in my questions already. No, perfect. Did you have anything to add before we finish?
No, once again,
nearly done enough time anyway.
Thank you again for having me today, Nick. It's you know, I think it's an interesting subject. It's obviously, you know, we when we put this out there, you know, there was lots of feedback that this is something that people relate to, you know, and it is something you see commonly across businesses. I hope that there's been some useful tidbits there that people can take away and take back to their organisations. I'd be fascinated to hear from anyone. If that is the case, you know, and you can do that. I'm Jeremy at everydaypm.co.uk. Sorry, jeremy.nichols@everydaypm.co.uk. Drop me a line. But if any of what I've said is interesting to you and you'd like to continue that conversation, do give me a call. But no, thank you. It's been a pleasure once again to join you for lunch.
Brilliant. And if anyone has any subjects that they find they come up against quite a lot in their project world, do let us know, because it'd be great to be focusing on problems that you're facing, and we can help you come up with some advice and tips on how to handle them. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Everyone. Have a good day.